Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios is my good friend, my buddy, my pal, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there, man?
Hey, Mark. I'm doing really well. It's good to be back in the Bourbon Life Studios after a week off, right?
Yeah. You know, it feels like it has been forever, and I know you and I recorded, so maybe that's what it was, because we had a cancellation last week, and we had to revisit an older episode, which is always fun to do. Mm-hmm. And the week before that, it was just you and me, which
That's
we
right,
hadn't done we hadn't done that in probably a year or more, where you and I just sit down and have a few drinks and catch up.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And we were due for it, if I do say so.
We were. I agree. But hey, we are back live. We actually have a live guest, a real guest with something interesting to share, much more so than us, right?
That's right. You all are in for a treat because we do have somebody. It's not just us, so...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I definitely want to thank all of our sponsors. Of course, we appreciate everything that they do for us. We couldn't do the show without their help and their support. So thank you all for everything that you do. And with that said, Matt, do you want to go ahead and tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Mark, what were you doing back in June of 2020?
Let's see. I was probably in lockdown because our governor shut down our whole state and told us we couldn't go anywhere.
That happened to every state, not just ours. Don't blame the governor.
I know. I'm just being funny. But yes, I was locked in my home for the most part, and trying to figure out how to grow a fledgling podcast because we were only about 3 or 4 months old at that point in time, Matt.
That's right. But if you were listening to the Bourbon Life Podcast, specifically episode 17, you got to hear a podcast with our guest. We brought him back. We loved him so much on episode 17, and man, it has been too long. But we are so excited to have back on the Bourbon Life Podcast the master distiller of Grain and Barrel and Chicken Cock Whiskey, Gregg Snyder. Gregg, welcome back to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you, Mark. I mean, yeah, man, it doesn't seem like it's been that long ago, but I guess it was. I mean, gosh, you're right. I'm an avid turkey hunter, and actually the governor wouldn't let me come from Indiana into Kentucky because of COVID. So he banned all non-resident hunting back then. So I remember it well, but I actually remember the podcast we did, and it was a great one. I appreciate the opportunity to be back on with you guys again.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you on here. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. And again, like I said, you know, the last one, Matt and I just did it ourselves. So it's always nice when we get someone with a lot more interesting things to talk about than just me and Matt.
That's right. The pleasure is not just ours, but also our listeners' pleasure here. They don't have to listen to us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, we've got something. We're going to get to a new product that you guys just put out. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but kind of laying the groundwork for that. I think we're going to go back and revisit one of the expressions when we were on the show, or when you're on the show with us back in 2020. If I remember correctly, we had the straight bourbon, we had the straight rye, and then we also, I think, Matt, we had the righteous blonde. Was that right?
That does sound correct. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was right. So I think what we're going to do this round is we're going to go back, and like I said, this will lay a little bit of a groundwork for what we're going to have, the special pour that's going to be coming up a little bit later. But we're going to go back and revisit the Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey. So, Gregg, if you don't mind, you want to tell our listeners a little bit about that, or a lot of bit, whatever, about that rye whiskey that you got there?
Well, I will indeed. Actually, when you guys first tasted that rye, and you can't imagine all the accolades and the the people have loved it so much. When we first bottled that was actually the first expression that I was responsible for, that we laid down at Bardstown Bourbon Company. Bardstown Bourbon Company is a home of Chicken Cock Whiskey. You know, I don't know. Okay. Kind of recant a little bit. You guys might remember not, but they have what they call a collaborative distillation program. You know, I've been in the business. I'm in my 45th year now in this great industry. And Steve Nally, their master distiller, is a dear friend of mine. Steve's been in it. He actually just celebrated recently his 50th anniversary in the industry. So,
yeah.
But Steve and I go way back, and dear friend of mine. Oh my God, I've probably known him 40 years. But anyhow, their collaborative distillation program. I provide them the mash bills of our whiskeys. Our rye is actually a 95% rye, 5% malted barley. And then I also give them the work instructions, the time and temperatures I want to cook the grains, the specifications I want to use for any enzymes, any fermentation, the beer chemistry, the distillation. But then when they make our whiskey, I go down and oversee the process to make sure they follow the work instructions correctly. And they're great. I mean, they got the best crew in the industry. They got some fabulous equipment, and they're making some fantastic whiskey. So I go down and oversee the process, but take it a step further. I actually have oversight from all the way from the beginning of the barrel. I select the logs, and I don't know if we got into this the last time back in June of 2020, but I actually go out to West Virginia to one of my consulting clients, West Virginia Great Barrel Company. I select the logs that we're going to cut into staves and heading. I'm there to oversee that process. Then we stack those staves, put them in the air outside in the environment to natural air dry 10 to 12 months. And then a year later, about a week and a half before we're going to make our whiskey, I go back out there and oversee the barrel making process to make sure every barrel's toasted properly, every barrel's charred properly, and the construction's top quality. So I have oversight from bark to barrel to bourbon to bottle, all the way through the process, whether it's bourbon or rye. So yeah, that's it's a great relationship with Bardstown Bourbon Company. The first you tasted was right at 2.5 years old, and people couldn't believe it. People ask me all the time we do tasting. I said, "Wow, man, how old is this? This is great." I said, "Well, how old do you think it is?" And most people say, "Oh, it's got to be at least 5-6 years old." And I show them on the back, if it's less than 4 years old, you got to show it somewhere on the bottle. And right by the UPC code, it said, aged at least 24 months. It was about 2.5 years old when we aged it. What you're drinking today is actually 4-year-old, a little over 4-year-old. So.
Okay. Well, you know what, Greg, actually, this is the bottle that we originally had. So I think we're still drinking so we can compare notes. You've got so the baseline straight whiskey, the rye that we've got, this is from the original batch. So this is still a little bit younger whiskey. So, but you've got your 4-year-old there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So see, that'll be interesting. We can do some comparison notes between the two and see what we come up with.
Okay.
Matt, what do you pick up, man, in terms of the nose on this one? It's been a minute since I've had this.
It's been a minute for me too. And man, I am just remembering how much I really enjoy it. The nose, to me, it's got a lot of flavor, no burn whatsoever, no alcohol, nothing off-putting. I get pick up notes of like cocoa, which was the first note that I had, a nice note of cocoa. Then there's definitely caramel, a lot of green apple with it as well. It's got like a really nice, tart, bright, sour green apple on the nose as well. A little bit of the barrel's coming across, but for a 2.5 year rye whiskey, it definitely has the nose and the appearance in the glass of something far, far older.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Matt, unfortunately, I've been battling a sinus infection for the last 3 days. And I was thinking, I've been on medication and I should be able to pick up a lot of stuff, but I mean, I struggle anyway, Matt. I do with my nosings and my tasting. So, and it's not COVID. I did get tested for COVID, so I do not have COVID, which is a good thing. But yeah, I'm not going to be able to add a whole lot, Matt. So like normal, you're going to carry the notes on this one. But Greg, you've got the 4-year-old. So what between the 2.5 and to the 4-year-old, what's some differences that you pick up in terms of the nosing on that?
Well, before I get into that, let me tell you something. I just did I do VIP tours down at Bardstown Bourbon Company. We have a group coming in from wherever market I've been visiting or retailers, distributors, or whatever. And I'll take them and I'll kind of show them around. But what I do within my VIP tours, I do progressional tastings. I let them taste the whiskey right off the still at 125 proof before it goes in the barrel. And I'll taste it at, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, whatever. I always taste the whiskey at least every 6 months. Okay. And this last group that came through, I had them pull some samples and I had them taste our rye. The rye was 14 months old. And everybody tasted it. I didn't tell them how old it was. They tasted it. Said, "Holy cow, that's phenomenal." And that's the unique thing about rye. If you do use good grain, good rye grain, I'm telling you what, it absorbs so much flavor out of that barrel so much quicker. It's phenomenal how much quicker it'll absorb the flavor. So as far as what I'm drinking, the little over 4-year-old, again, it's very comparable. I mean, I love the spicy, peppery notes, which will lead in, and you kind of segue into the second edition of tonight's show. But I'm telling you what, I just absolutely love it. You guys may know some of my background. I think we talked about it previously, but 10 years of my 45 years, I was the vice president of Austin Nichols and managing director of Wild Turkey Distillery. We made a rye whiskey, and I wasn't a big fan of it. We had like 35% corn in the mash bill, and it just had a bitterness, a harshness that I wasn't really fond of. But when I started working with grain and barrel spirits and chicken cock whiskey in particular, we started looking at coming out with a rye. And I said, I was weaned on bourbon, and that's what I know. And I like certain ryes. Anyway, I did some research, and some of these 95.5s and 95% rye, 5% malted barleys were fantastic. And so that's kind of what we adopted that mash bill, and I kind of tweaked some of the work instructions as far as the time and temperatures and the process. But I love it. I mean, it came out exactly the way I'd envisioned. And I couldn't be prouder of our rye whiskey. It is I do tastings all over the country, and people come up to the table and they say, I'm a bourbon drinker, I don't like rye. I said, well, just try this one. And holy cow, you can't imagine the number of people that we've won over to become, rye drinkers, particular ryes, not all ryes, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's great. Matt was a rye drinker. He's a big fan of rye, more so probably than bourbon, I would think. Is that fair to say, Matt?
50-50. Probably a little more rye. Yeah, you're right.
Non-committal. That's good. That's always good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he really introduced me more to rye because I was I was a bourbon guy, and that was what I drank. That's what I enjoyed, and really hadn't given rye much of a chance. But the more time I got to spend and hang out with Matt, he kept encouraging me to try different ryes, and now I've become quite a rye fan. So, yeah, this is a really good, at least, we're talking about the nose. I'm not going to get to the palate just yet. We're going to save that for just a little bit later. But I remember being really impressed with this one. I wish I could just smell it. But the old schnoz is full of prednisone and other drugs tonight. So it's not picking up a whole lot, unfortunately.
But that's understandable. But I got to tell you, I've always drank my, whether it's rye or bourbon, I always drank my whiskey either neat or on the rocks. But I've had a friend of mine introduce me one time to an old fashioned made out of the chicken cock rye, and holy cow, it was so delicious. And just recently, chicken cock Kentucky Straight Rye actually came in third place out of 240 some odd contestants in some cocktail for a Manhattan. And again, nice. I mean, Manhattan old fashioned, it really rings through. It's so good.
Yeah, I could definitely see that in an old fashioned, because I love old fashions. I'm like you. I like to drink it. Usually, just drink it neat. Maybe put a cube in every once in a while. But once in a while, you just get that hankering. You want something refreshing. And sometimes on a 90-degree Kentucky day like we've had here, straight whiskey is just not necessarily what you want. You might want to get something a little cooler to drink. So an old fashioned is great. But when that rye, using a rye, and I love making an old fashioned with a rye whiskey. Just because if it's a good rye, that spice really stands out, and it'll shine through that sugar, and that combination of that spiciness and that sugary flavor is just so wonderful. So you gave me a great idea with that. So we'll definitely have to try that one for sure.
And please do. It's fabulous.
And this is it's a 90 proofer, right? So
90 proof, yes sir. Yeah.
So in terms of the process, the 90 proof, I'm assuming that was reached at some point, just because that's where the blend and it tastes the best for you guys.
Absolutely. One of the beauties of that I enjoy with my responsibilities as master distiller, companies kind of give me enough leeway, enough leash, so to speak. At every product that we've bottled, I've been able to taste and really hone in on the ideal proof point. If we bottle that at 80 proof, hell, we could have got a bunch more cases per per barrel, and the company could have made a lot more money. But when Monty Antela, the founder of Grain and Barrel Spirits, approached me and shared his vision to resurrect Kentucky or chicken cock back to Kentucky, and asked me if I would help him resurrect it back to Kentucky and serve in the role of master distiller. I said basically on one condition. We are truly committed to bringing this brand back to its high quality prominence that the brand once knew many, many years ago. And he agreed to that. So, kind of that's what we've been working on. That's what my focus has been for over the last 5+ years now. And I think we're well on our way.
Yeah, that's great. So, you've alluded to your history, your past, what you've done, your many years in the industry. Greg, I know we talked about it on the first episode you were on, but that was 114 episodes ago. So I think it's probably a good idea. Maybe let's revisit. If you don't mind, just take some time. Tell our listeners really, how you got in, because I love the story, how you got into the industry and all the different things that you've done.
Well, I don't know if we got that much time tonight, but yeah, I guess I can start out. But I've been blessed. I've been very fortunate. I have a business degree from Indiana University. In 1978, when I graduated with that business degree from Indiana University, through career placement, a lot of companies would come and they would post job interviews opportunities. And so I would sign up the ones I was interested in. And one of them was Joseph E. Seagerman's son actually posted a job interview opportunity. So I signed up, interviewed with him, and that was one of the job opportunities I got coming right out of college. And back then, Seagram's had a facility in Louisville, Kentucky, on 7th Street. I don't know if you know where Central Street meets 7th. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Louisville much, but anyhow, they had a beautiful facility, a huge facility. And I started in June of 1978 as a frontline supervisor. And Seagram's was a great company to work for back then. If you listened and learned and picked things up quick and were aggressive and wanted to learn, they gave you an opportunity. So I was very blessed to be put on a fast track. And in the 5 years that plant was open, because as you guys know, in 1978, the whiskey industry was on a decline. And eventually a lot of companies like Seagram's shut down facilities and consolidated and what have you. But at that time, in that 5 years that they were open, I worked there. I literally worked in every department within that facility. I mean, I worked in distillery and dryer house, making whiskey, processing, the byproduct, the stillage, worked in the barrel warehouse, filling barrels, putting barrels in ricks, taking barrels out of ricks, dumping barrels, gauging tanks, filtering, blending, processing, receiving, bottling, shipping, quality, maintenance, you name it. Every single department within that facility, the production operations anyway, I worked in, and it was a great training ground. And they shut down in 1983, and I was one of the lucky ones. I got an opportunity to relocate. I was going to move up to Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which they had that huge distillery up there, which is now MGP, as a lot of people know. But they had a warehousing operation about 25, 30 miles from there in Shannon, Ohio. And I was going to be there managing that warehouse operation for 9 to 12 months. And then we were going to move me to New York City to the corporate offices. And that time, I wasn't real excited about moving to New York City. So took the severance package. And part of the severance package, they pay for my education for 1 year. So I was able to work it out. Bellarmine University in Louisville had a 2-year MBA program. And luckily, I was able to convince the administration that, I needed to do it sooner, and I could do it sooner. So they agreed, and I got my MBA in 1 year's time, and Seagram paid for every penny of it, and it was fabulous. So shortly thereafter, I got an opportunity to work for Brown-Forman. And so I started at Brown-Forman managing their bottling operation on the afternoon shift. Did that for a little over a year. And then I got a promotion. I was responsible for all the dry goods, the bottles, the boxes, the labels, the closures, everything the bottling department needed. I was responsible for ensuring that we had plenty of inventory, and make sure it was there when it needed to be there. And did that for about 9 months. And then they added to my responsibilities, and I got all the wet goods. I mean, all the tank trucks coming down from Collingwood, Canada, Canadian Mist that we bottled there in Louisville. tank trucks coming up from Mexico with Pepe Lopez tequila. But then in addition, I had the early times warehouse operation as a part of that responsibility as well. So I not only had responsibility for all the dry goods, but all the wet goods that the bottling operation needed there in Louisville. And a little over a year after that, I got an opportunity and a promotion to go out to the cooperage. And so in, that was 1989. I went out to the cooperage as director of operations. And so I worked for Brown-Forman a total of 12 years. A little over 9 of those 12 years, I actually managed their cooperage operations. So it was great. I've made whiskey, aged whiskey, bottled, shipped whiskey, but have the opportunity to understand the importance of that barrel. That barrel represents 60 to 70% of the flavor in any bottle of whiskey. Right. And it's so important. So got to learn so much about white oak and the barrel and the chemical composition and the various variables that you're looking for. And so that's carried and helped me throughout my career as well.
So you, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I don't want to ramble on here, but
no.
After that, I had an opportunity, actually, 1998. I wasn't real pleased with some of the politics that were going on at the corporate world, which happens. And I started, picking up the phone when recruiters would call. And one of the first calls I got was this recruiter out of Atlanta. And he had an opportunity for me with a company called Pernod Ricard. Pernod Ricard owned Wild Turkey at that time. And so anyhow, luck would have it, I interviewed, got the job. I was vice president of Austin Nichols and the managing director at Wild Turkey Distillery. And actually managed that facility. Jimmy and Eddie both worked for me during that time frame, and love them to death. I mean, Jimmy's like a brother to me, and still the last of the true Mohicans when it comes to the great master distillers in this world. But but I did that for a little over 10 years, and then from there I left and went up to Maine, worked for a company called White Rock Distilleries. Not sure if you're familiar with them. When I was there, the big brand we had was Pinnacle Vodka. We actually created the dessert category of flavored vodka. I was actually on the innovation team when we came out with Pinnacle Whipped. I don't know if you ever tried it or heard about it. It's whipped cream flavored vodka. And I mean, it smelled and tasted like whipped cream. It was
I remember. I never drink it, but I do remember. Yeah, that was a big craze for sure.
Well, they've changed since Beam owns it now. It's changed a little bit, but anyhow, back then, I'm telling you what, it smelled and tasted like whipped cream. And in the first 12 months that was on the market, that flavor alone sold over 750,000 cases. Just that one flavor. It was phenomenal. Wow. And Pinnacle, for 3 straight years, Pinnacle was the fastest growing spirits brand, not just vodka, fastest growing spirits brand in the U.S. And it just took off. And that's why in 2012, Jim Beam acquired the brand and the plant facilities, plant assets. And after they did that, they asked me to move back to Kentucky and kind of head up the transition of the brands they acquired to the Frankfurt facility. So I did that. Took a little over a year. And eventually I got an opportunity to go to work for a company down in Bowling Green. You ever heard of Western Spirits? Yeah. So I was a vice president of operations for Western Spirits. They're big brand Bird Dog whiskeys, but they make Calumet Farm bourbon, Sam Houston bourbon, Lexington bourbon, some of those brands. But so I was VP of ops down there. I was actually living and working in Bowling Green during the week, and then driving back home to Southern Indiana, Floyd's Knobs, Indiana, on weekends. And I did that for a little over 3.5 years. It's just a little bit too far to commute every day. And so after doing that for a little over 3.5 years, my wife was having some health issues. So I decided, time to ramp up my retirement plan. And that was not retire, but start my own consulting company. So I started a consulting company. Grain and Barrel Spirits was one of the first clients I picked up. West Virginia Great Barrel Company, the guys who wanted to start this cooperage, was my second client I picked up. And so, I've looked at it. I got a small consulting company. Don't do a lot of work. I got a few customers that I work with, but those are my 2 biggest right now. So
very nice. You've got a great career, 45 years. That's pretty impressive. That's really impressive. No doubt about it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, we're at the end of round 1 here. So why don't we take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the palate and the finish on the straight rye whiskey that we're drinking on right now, and we'll move over to the surprise, exciting new product that's coming out. So we can do that. But everybody just sit tight. We'll be back with more with Gregg Snyder from Chicken Cock Whiskey in just a minute. Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsofFrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for a round session period, whatever you want to call it, number 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me still, he stayed, my good friend, my buddy, my bourbon, in this case, my rye drinking buddy, Matt. How you doing, man?
Mark, I'm doing really well. What episode number are we on, by the way?
This is going to be episode number 131.
131. Wow. I've made it with you through thick and thin this far. I'm not going to quit on 131.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This would be the wrong show to quit on, man, because we've got a great guest and great whiskey, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This would be the wrong one to quit on, because we've got with us the master distiller of Grain and Barrel and Chicken Cock Whiskey, Gregg Snyder. He was our previous guest on episode 17 back in June of 2020, and we are so fortunate to have him back. So, Gregg, welcome back for round number 2.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. I enjoy chatting with guys, especially guys that are so knowledgeable about the industry and the product itself, and so it's great to be here. So thank you.
Oh well, you're on the wrong podcast if that's what you're looking for.
You know, I mean, when a guy with 45 years of experience gives you a compliment like that, man, you take it and run with it, Matt.
Touche.
Yeah. All right. So we're still drinking on this Chicken Cock, this Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey. And Matt and I were drinking the initial round that we had from the show back in 2020. So this is about 2.5 years old. Is that right, Greg?
That's correct. Yeah. If you still have the first batch you got, it was right at 4.5 years old. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm 2.5 years old. I'm sorry. Yeah.
2.5. Yeah. So Matt, let's jump over to the palate and the finish on this and kind of talk it through. What do you pick up? Because again, man, as I'm sitting here taking taste of it, I'm just not able to discern a whole lot, unfortunately. It's just, it's like everything. Even my limited palate is even more limited tonight, Matt.
Oh, all right. Well, let me see what I can do on this one. Maybe I can give it a shot here. It's nice to taste some of that spice coming right on the front of the palate. That peppercorn's coming through. Some of the spices. There's like a little bit of baking spice, maybe like a little allspice or a little clove right on the front too. Then it's got a nice creamy marshmallow, it's like honeysuckle sweetness to it on the mid palate. Before, again, I'm picking up that like juicy green apple, Granny Smith, or some sort of like a really juicy tart apple coming down, and then a nice long finish, just like warm honey, sweet like barrel type notes, kind of like that sweet oak and that char, that graham cracker marshmallow type flavor, that vanilla that you pick up from a really nicely done charred or toasted barrel coming down on the finish. I think that really shines through there.
Very nice, Matt. Greg, how'd he do?
Wow. I'm telling you what, I'm impressed. I do tastings all over the country. And one of the first things I tell people, this is not an exam. There is no wrong or right answer. what your nose smells and what your palate tastes is going to be totally different from the person next to you. And I'm telling you what, Matt hit it spot on with my palate taste. I've had so many people that have tasted the same age offering you guys are tasting. And again, everybody's different. So there's no right or wrong answers, but I hear dill pickles. I hear, spearmint. I hear asparagus. I hear eucalyptus. I mean, all these other things, and I don't get that. But man, what you said, Matt, I'm telling you, that is spot on from the first day I tasted it. And our palates are pretty much in alignment. That's pretty impressive, man. I didn't think anybody had a palate like I did. So maybe there is a doppelganger in this world. Huh?
Hey, maybe there's a future for me somewhere here in this industry. Who knows?
Yeah, man. No doubt about it. Well, Gregg, we had a great conversation about your experience and your past and how you got to where you are now. But one thing I wanted to ask you, and we talked about this just a moment ago before we got back on. But when we originally did the show in 2020, it was June. Everything had kind of shut down in Kentucky and across the country for the most part, but we were shut down in March. So COVID, I mean, it had a severe impact on a lot of people. So can you talk about, in terms of your brand and everything, the operations and everything that goes into it, how did COVID affect you guys?
It's hard to really put a thumb on. When it comes to social media and computers and you name it, I'm about the lowest redneck, low tech redneck you're going to find. I'm telling you what, I'm terrible. But I have done, especially when COVID started, in the first year and a half, I probably did 100 to 150 podcasts. And so you adapt. It's one of those things that I couldn't go out into stores and travel the country and do tastings and what have you. And so, you adapt. And so, forums like we're doing tonight, it was so important. And, we would send samples to various groups throughout the country. And again, I did 100 to 150 podcasts in the first year to year and a half. And it was great. I mean, people kind of embraced it. They would go out and they buy it, they try it. And I mean, sales took off. I mean, the following for chicken cock is phenomenal right now. It's one of those situations where, it's I guess it's a good blessing, but demand exceeds the supply. And
yeah, that's
great. Such a small operation, small brand, but and as things have loosened up, I've done more travel. I try to go out to do a market visit at least once a month, and for the last year, the market visits I've done have just been great. I mean, people are so embraced that they love it. They want to know more about it. Of course, the name kind of attracts people's when they first see the name chicken cock. They what's this, And so it kind of attracts them. But once you tell them the history, how the brand got its name, and so, I mean, they really become engaged. And I love it. As I mentioned, today's whiskey drinkers are so much more knowledgeable than what they were 10, 15 years ago. And I love it. When I do tastings, I mean, I love the engagement. I love all the great questions I get. And hell, I could stand there all night and drink whiskey and talk about it. So it's fun. I'm having a ball.
Well, that's great. So you are getting back out a little bit more now that the restrictions have lifted somewhat, and
absolutely
things are getting back somewhat to normal. So, well, that's good. Was there anything that happened during COVID that made you all kind of pivot in terms of your production or your operations that you said, you know what, maybe we do want to do it this way moving forward? I mean, was there any?
Not at all. I got to tell you, when you look back to March of 2020, kind of when they use as the base plate, I guess, when COVID kind of started, chicken cock was sold in about 12 to 14 states in the southeast region of the country. And the gentleman who was the executive VP of sales at that time, he was a workhorse, man. And he got out and he pushed and he hustled. And about a year and a half later, we went from about 12 to 14 states to 42 states.
Wow.
So it just exploded. And again, that's what I'm saying. The following, the momentum the brand has, it just skyrocketed. And And so again, it's a great problem to have, but it's tough keeping up with demand. So
yeah, so let's talk about the rye whiskey itself. So that is well, we had the 2.5. That was your distillate. That's what Bardstown, you were making that.
That's correct. I had involvement with that one. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I gotcha. So then that's coming off, and then when you're doing your releases, the rye whiskey, that's a standard release. Is that right? That's something you all release on a regular basis?
That's correct. That's one of our flagship brand, our Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey and our Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Rye are two flagship brands. I mean, that's kind of what we continue to offer from here on out, I guess, and hopefully till I'm alive and passed on to the next world. But
so with the rye, the blends that you're doing, so what kind of sizes are you talking about when you're putting out a release? Or is it just a continual process?
It's small. You know, I kind of put things in perspective. This year, 2022, in February, I laid down 1,000 barrels of bourbon.
Okay.
In March, I laid down 200 barrels of rye. That's it. That's all we're going to make for the year.
Okay. All right.
And that's the most we made. And there's two things there. We'd like to increase. But, the home of, as I mentioned earlier, the home of Chicken Cock Whiskey is Bardstown Bourbon Company, and they're full capacity. Well, that's kind of driven them, as you guys may have heard, they're expanding. Right. They're actually building a whole new distillery. It's going to add another 50% capacity. So once that comes on board, hopefully we'll be able to expand it a little bit. We're small. Right now, we represent about 1% of what they produce. So we're very, very small. And again, it's just one of those things, demand definitely exceeds the supply, but, we're doing the best to, keep the balls in the air, keep them juggling and take care of the customers as well.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, Matt, let's get final thoughts on this Chicken Cock, the rye whiskey, before we move on to the special pour that we've got poured up next. What do you think?
Oh, well, if Greg and I have the same palate, then obviously this is a hit for me because it's probably the rye whiskey I would have blended and created. So I love it. I forgot how much I love it, in fact, coming back to it.
Well, you mentioned the 90 proof earlier. I don't know that I circled back all the way to answer your question, Mark, but the 90 proof, what I tried to do with all the expressions is, I'll taste them at barrel proof, and I start knocking them down till I really find the point where I feel the alcohol burn kind of subsides. It allows the flavors, the great flavors, to overtake the profile. And so for our bourbon and our rye, our flagship brands, Kentucky Straight Bourbon and Kentucky Straight Rye, that's 90 proof. That, to me, that was the ideal mark of where the alcohol burn subsides. You still get that little Kentucky hug, but it doesn't burn your esophagus, and it really allows the flavors to overtake the profile.
Yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. So moving on, we got another one poured up tonight. This is kind of a special one. This is your newest limited release, if I think that's correct. Greg, do you want to tell us about what we're going to be drinking next?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this next one is called Chicken Cock Island Rooster. Every year Grain and Barrel comes out with a couple of LTOs, limited time offerings, limited editions. And one of the LTOs we did for this year was Chicken Cock Island Rooster. Last year, early 2021, I met with the founder and we had a discussion. We were talking about LTOs we could come out for 2022. And I said, you know what? I said, man, I really love the spicy, peppery notes of our rye. I think they're phenomenal. We get a lot of accolades, a lot of compliments on it. I said, but you know what? I think it'd be great if we could enhance it with a little sweetness. And kind of told the founder what my thoughts were on it, and he agreed. And so we bought 25 rum barrels. And those barrels showed up in Bardstown. It was May of 2021. The day they showed up, I went down there and I threw up the door on the trailer, climbed up on the trailer, and I pulled the bung out of each barrel. And I nosed them. And I wanted to smell them, make sure they hadn't been sitting in the port, turning sour or rancid or funky. Mm-hmm. And every barrel was nice, sweet rum smell. I said, perfect. So we put our rye whiskey in those rum barrels and we aged them, and I taste them every month. I've had some rum barrel finished whiskeys that, in my opinion, and I'm not going to name names, but in my opinion, they were overpowered by the secondary barrel. And that's my concern. Anytime I do a finished whiskey, whether it's a beer barrel, rum barrel, whatever, wine barrel, I want to make sure that I don't allow that secondary barrel to overtake the flavor of the base whiskey. All you want to do is enhance that base whiskey. That base whiskey, you need to maintain the integrity of it, but just enhance it a little bit with the flavors from that secondary barrel. So I taste this every month. And as I said, we put the whiskey, the rye in there in those barrels in May of 2021. In November, when I tasted it, I said, boom, that's it. Let's dump those barrels now. I don't want to add any more sweetness, any more rum flavor. And so November of 2021, we dumped the barrels and we put them in a tank at barrel proof.
Okay.
And Grain and Barrel didn't want to bottle it until the first quarter of 2022. And so it was actually in the end of February when we actually bottled the first round of it. Now, I said first round. There was so much flavor left in those barrels. I said, we got to do this again. It's so good. It's one of my favorite whiskeys of all time. I'm telling you, it was so good. I said, we've got to do it again. So there was so much flavor left in it. So we put some more rye whiskey, and we did a second round in about 3-4 weeks ago. It sat in there about 7 months this time, but it was comparable in sweetness and flavor. So we dumped it out, and we bottled a second round. So
nice. That's pretty impressive. You're able to get that many. You got 2 rounds off of these rum barrels.
Oh, yeah. They were so full of flavor. It was phenomenal.
Yeah. So interesting question on that. You said it kind of got to that same point where you get that same sweetness, but I'm assuming you got 2 different rounds, 2 different flavor profiles, or are you able to blend them down to where you're going to match batch 1 and batch 2 pretty close?
They are so similar together. If I put the bottles side by side, I don't believe you could tell the difference, Mark. They're so
okay.
Good. Yeah.
Well, I know tonight I definitely couldn't tell the difference.
Or Matt couldn't tell there. I'm sorry. Either one, but you might. Who knows? I mean, you got a 50-50 chance, so hey.
That's right. Matt, speaking of nosing it, what do you pick up on this one, man?
Well, before we even get to the nose, I just want to comment on the super beautiful color in the glass. Like when I compare these two to the rye whiskey that we were drinking on the first round and what we have here, just the contrast and that beautiful dark auburn and copper color on this second here, the Island Rooster, is just absolutely gorgeous.
Good eye, man. Yeah, good eye. Yeah, absolutely.
On the nose, I pick up.
The good thing is,
yep.
I was just going to say, the good thing is, Matt, I can see that color difference. I don't have to taste it or smell it. I can actually see it. I agree with you 100%, Matt.
Oh, you would have said it anyway if I didn't beat you to it.
So man, the palate, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Matt.
No, you're absolutely fine, Mark. Excuse me. The nose on this, I pick up what I'm perceiving to be that influence from the rum barrel. I'm picking up like some butterscotch, some molasses, then some of those flavors that we had before coming in, a little bit of the pepper, kind of a smoothness, and then ironically and maybe weirdly enough, it's almost like I pick up a little bit of pineapple on it as well. Maybe like that tart apple that I had in the beginning on the regular. It's kind of sweetened up, but it's still got a little bit of spice, still something in there, some fruit that I pick up on it as well.
Very nice, Matt. The butterscotch, I can actually detect that. So at least I get one good thing out of this, and I can't wait to come back and revisit this when things are back to normal for me. Because I'm really disappointed. I had not cracked this bottle. I've had it for several weeks, and I have been saving it for tonight, knowing that we're going to taste it. And I've not had any whiskey in about 6 days, just because I've been on medicine and I didn't want to, do any damage having whiskey and medicine together. So I was really excited to get to do this tonight. And now I'm like, damn it. What are you going to do though? Right. I mean, what are you going to do? But yeah, I can pick up that butterscotch for sure, Matt. And the color, I just can't get over the color. It's beautiful. Now, let's talk about, Greg, we kind of mentioned in the break as well. I think we talked a little bit about the bottles. And of course, we don't do video, but we can put pictures up on Instagram. I remember in our first episode, that was the one thing that really just stood out to me was the beautiful glass, the design. Can you talk about that a little bit on those bottles?
Yeah, yes, sir. I sure can, Mark. We have 2 bottle designs right now currently, and both these bottles are actually replicas of pre-Prohibition bottles that Chicken Cock was bottling. Chicken Cock's an old brand, originated 1856 in Paris, Kentucky. So it's been around a long, long time. But both the bottle designs we have now for the product we put out are replicas of pre-Prohibition bottles. Now, the Chicken Cock Straight Bourbon, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, and Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey, they're in a flask bottle. And both these bottles were actually pint size, okay, back pre-Prohibition. But we blew them up to 750 and 750 milliliter, and basically kept the design. If you look at the flask bottle, it's kind of like an old 750 hip flask. It's got a concave and convex side, but it's got a honeycomb embossing. That honeycomb represents chicken wire, and that's what's the original bottle.
Nice.
Now, the other bottle, what we call our starburst pattern, the one that the Island Rooster is in, it's got a starburst embossing on it, but it also has the old-time jigger cap. It's got a metal cap that you pull off, still has a cork finish, but you unscrew it and it can serve as a shot glass. So, but that was a common, a very popular style back in those days as well.
Now, going back to talking about COVID earlier, I know we've talked with other distilleries and producers that have had issues getting glass, especially during COVID. Has that been an issue for you guys?
Yeah, it's been an issue with us and everybody else that I know of in this industry. It was such a hassle. We ordered glass. We ordered our glass bottles in March of I can't remember now. Yeah, 2020. And they didn't show up till February of 2021.
Oh,
it was almost a full year. And so we had some out of stocks. I mean, and you got to be careful, especially with control states. There's control states out there. If you don't have stock to replenish the warehouses, they'll delist you. Then you got to go through all the bureaucracy again of getting relisted. And not only us, but I mean, everybody I know of in the industry, because I talk to them all and I got a great network. It's just same problem. I mean, the supply chain just went to hell, and it made it tough, made it real tough.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys were able to get your glass and get these bottles out, because they're just gorgeous bottles. The labels, everything's just really unique. And like I said, we're going to put some pictures up on Instagram so everybody can see what we're talking about. Since we don't do video, I think it'll be great to let everybody see that. So, Matt, I tell you what, we're kind of at the end of round 2 here, so probably a good place to take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we can come back and we'll talk about the palate and the finish, and we'll move on to some other topics with Gregg Snyder, the master distiller, Chicken Cock Whiskey, in just a minute.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. Back with me to finish out the show tonight is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there?
Hey, Mark, I am doing great, and I would not miss the exciting conclusion because I've made it this far. So
that's right.
I'm going to stick around because we've got our great guest, Gregg Snyder, the master distiller of Grain and Barrel and Chicken Cock Whiskey. He's back with us. And Greg, over the break, you and I were chatting offline here a little bit about the Island Rooster and about the proof, because this is a 95 proofer. The first two we tasted the first one, we tasted was at 90. And you said that you sort of reverse engineered and came at it a backward way. You want to tell our listeners a little bit about the process and how you came up with that?
So yeah, again, one of the leeways I get as master distiller, they've allowed me the opportunity to kind of select what proof we're going to bottle it at. Most companies, if they're financially driven, they're trying to get as many bottles per barrel they can out of it. And so 80 proof, 86 proof, a lot depends on the price point as well. And again, the Chicken Cock Island Roosters is a pretty hefty price point. It's very limited edition, but it's SRP is right around $200 a bottle, depending on what store you go to. But I'm telling you what, the flavors, the product is phenomenal. And so I mentioned with the rye, our Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Rye, Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Bourbon. The process I use, I start at barrel proof, and I start knocking it down with our reversed osmosis water till I get to the point where the alcohol burn subsides and allows the flavors from the barrel and the whiskey itself to overtake the profile. For the Island Rooster, same thing. Top management saying, we got to try to maximize our dollar, and I get that. I'm a business guy. I've been in it a long time, and I understand the drill. But in my role, trying to bring out the best quality product we can to offer the consumers for the price. This one, I started low. I said, you know what? I'll start at 80 proof, way dilute, 86 proof, went to 90 proof, went to 92 proof, went to 93 proof, and all those were too diluted. There was too much water because I already tasted it at barrel proof. I know the flavors this whiskey has to offer coming out of the barrel. When we hit 95, boom, that is exactly the point where I said, wow, now the flavors, the alcohol burn was still soft enough. It allowed those flavors to overtake the profile. And I said, man, that's exactly what I want. The sweetness is right. You still maintain the integrity, the spicy, peppery notes of the rye. That's the proof. And so, again, I've been very fortunate in given the autonomy to kind of select the proof that we're going to bottle it at thus far. And so I'm very proud and very privileged to be able to do that. So,
yeah, that's really cool. And talking back to those two batches, so they're both at 95 proof. So you're able to take two completely different batches of 25 barrels and proof them to 95, and they're still going to be that close. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is what it is. Again, I knew the second round would take a little longer. But when I first nosed those barrels, I said, man, these are freshly dumped. There was so much rum flavor in those barrels. And I said, man, this is going to be great. And so, again, every month I'd taste it. After 6 months, I said, boom, I don't want any more sweetness. And we dumped them, and I re-smelled the barrels. I said, man, they still got so much more flavor to give, so much to extract. And that's the thing you got to be careful. Every time you use a barrel, there's going to be less color to extract. There's going to be less flavor to extract. But it's all up, time and temperature. And again, we were able, that's the beauty of my relationship with the folks down at Bardstown Bourbon Company. They kind of allow me to cherry pick where I'm going to age my barrels as well. So the second round, they went on the top floor to kind of get a little, I won't say accelerated, but more heat to drive it into the wood a little deeper. So,
yeah. And God knows that anytime you drive past Bardstown Bourbon, they're putting up at least one, if not two or more new rick houses.
Oh, you should see the plan they got. I mean, they can't build them fast enough. It's amazing.
It's crazy. Now, just kind of off topic a little bit, but I know that they merged or took over Green River. Is that right? Green River Distilling?
That's right. They got Bardstown Bourbon Company got bought out by an investment company in Chicago here recently. And right. That's when shortly thereafter they announced the plan to expand and build a whole new distillery right there on the current premises. So they're going to add another 50%. If you go down past their facility on that road and go around the corner, they bought another 300 acres of farmland where they're building additional warehouses. And then here most recently, that same investment company that bought them, they bought Green River Distillery. So they're serious about the business and very committed to it. And I love it because it's there's no end in sight, guys. I'm telling you what, to me, it's a brilliant investment.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. Mm-hmm. So from your perspective, production, that's your stuff you're going to maintain there at Bardstown Bourbon. So it won't, like Green River is still going to maintain something completely different, I'm assuming, or do they know, or do you know?
I think everything's intact where it is. I mean, the reason that, again, one of the reasons that Bardstown Bourbon Company is expanding their existing facility is to accommodate, customers like us. We've been with them from the start. We want to expand, but they haven't been able to expand because they're full capacity. So they're going to accommodate us, be able to expand, be able to meet other requirements as far as additional capacity. So, yeah, it's a great relationship, great people. I couldn't think of a better one. I've been in this business a long time, and they truly have one of the best teams I've ever worked with. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, we love those guys. We've always enjoyed being able to go down and hang out and do podcasts with them. Dan Calloway,
he's awesome.
Yeah, he really is. Anytime you go down there, he makes you feel like you're his best friend, and he's very genuine about it too.
He's a great guy. Love Dan. He's good.
Yeah. So we've had him on the show and got to spend some time with him, and just really enjoyed it a lot. So love what they're doing. That's great that you managed to connect with them and still have that relationship going, even as they continue to grow and expand. That they're still keeping things the way that they are, and that's obviously beneficial to you and to them as well. So that's really it's really cool. So now, Greg, you guys put out these limited releases. Did you say you're going to be doing maybe 2 or 3 of those a year? Is that kind of standard, or is that?
Yeah, the game plan has been the last couple of years, and going forward, we do a couple of LTOs, limited time offerings, every year. This year we did the Chicken Cock Island Rooster. We also did one earlier. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. It's called Chicken Cock Cotton Club. If you remember the story about the brand, when 1920 hit and Prohibition hit, like most distilleries, the distillery in Paris, Kentucky, that was making chicken cock whiskey, shut down. They sold the brand to a company in Montreal, Canada. That company made a rye whiskey, Canadian rye whiskey, and they bottle it in the chicken cock under the chicken cock label, but then they would seal that bottle in a tin can. The tin can protected the bottle when it was bootlegged back across the border in the U.S. But it showed up in a lot of speakeasies. But one of its claims to fame, it was the actual house whiskey at the Cotton Club in Harlem, New York during the Roaring '20s. Most famous speakeasy during that era. So anyhow, it's a lot of neat history. That's part of the history of chicken cock. But the founder of the company, I really didn't have anything to do with this one. This was his brainchild and his baby, and he did a great job with it. But he found some 20-year-old Canadian rye whiskey, and he was able to acquire that 20-year-old Canadian rye whiskey, and he wanted to come out with a pay homage to the brand back when it was the house whiskey at the Cotton Club 100 years ago, back during the Roaring '20s. And so he found this 20-year-old Canadian whiskey. We bottled it in our pre-Prohibition bottle, basically, and we sealed it in a commemorative tin can. It's actually tin can. This is the first in a series of 3 tin cans that the company is going to come out with. But this was the first one, and it's unique. I can show you guys on video, but it's so light in color, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So think back to 1920. 1920, there was only a handful of distilleries that had the money to afford a medicinal alcohol permit. So most all the distilleries in the U.S. shut down. When those distilleries shut down, the cooperages shut down too, because they just lost their customer base. And so that forced Canadian distilleries to start aging their whiskey in used barrels. And even today, most Canadian whiskey is aged in used barrels. And this Canadian rye, this 20-year-old Canadian rye, based on the color, I'm guessing it was the 3rd time that barrel was used. But, every time you use a barrel, there's less color to extract, there's less flavor to extract. And it's so unique. To me, it doesn't taste like a rye whiskey. It's very fruity, floral on the nose and on the palate, very soft and so unique. But it's it's a high price point, and again, it's, we've got for over the next 3 years, with this being number 1, later. That was actually 2021's OND because of the glass situation we talked about earlier. That didn't get bottled till late in December. It was supposed to come out in September, October, but got pushed back. So anyhow, in OND of this year, Grain and Barrel Spirits is coming out with what they're going to call Chicken Cock Chanticleer. Chanticleer is French for rooster. And again, it's going to be our bourbon that we finished in a cognac barrel. And I've already dumped the barrels. I mean, the barrels, it only took 4 months. Cognac is such an overpowering, very, very powerful flavor profile that after 4 months, I took it out. And man, it is a butterscotch bomb. It's going to be bottled at 112 proof, kind of a play on the 1856, 56 being the proof by alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
And being 112 proof. Yeah. But it'll be the second rendition in a tin can as well. So anyhow, there's a lot of forethought going into this, and the company's doing great. And we got some great products coming out down the line as well.
Well, great. So let's talk about this Island Rooster. And Matt, we'll talk about the palate here in just a second. But before I do that, you talked about putting this in those 25 rum barrels. So the product at that point in time, so the rye itself was 4.5 years old?
No, actually, when it went in there, it was a little over 3.5 years old.
Okay. All right.
And so the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau, actually changed their regulations. Previously, when you dumped a whiskey the first time, the age stopped. That's how old it was. Well, they changed this last year. And if you finish it now in a secondary barrel, the age will continue. So this is actually over 4 years old in wood. Okay.
I got you. Mm-hmm. I did not even realize that they had done that. Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't either until an expert told me about it.
Well, so very cool. Matt, so let's talk about the palate. What do you pick up on that?
Yeah. So you took a well-respected rye in and of itself before you even put it in that secondary barrel at 3.5 years old. I mean, just based on what we were tasting at 2.5. So you already took some high quality product and put it in the secondary barrel. And I think it definitely shows. There's a lot of sweetness right on the front of the palate, picking up some of those dark sugars like brown sugar, molasses coming through. Then that spice hits right after that, which is really, really nice. It cuts through some of those dark sweet flavors and really brightens up the palate a bit. And then on the nose, I picked up pineapple, and it has this flavor of like a pineapple upside down cake, where there's like a little bit of kind of like a soft, cakey, like vanilla-y type flavor, but there's the brightness from the pineapple and like that sweet like rum or whatever you use to glaze the pineapple with on the underside that makes kind of that syrup. It has a taste really reminiscent of that. And that spice comes back on the finish and just leaves like a really nice afterthought with the spice, leaves you kind of thinking a little bit more about it. It's really well done. I can't emphasize that enough, and I'm really, really loving it.
Thanks, Matt. I get sweetness. I can't tell you what it tastes like, but I can detect that it's sweet. There's a sweetness to it. But that even the spice, though, like you said, Matt, after you get that initial sweet, that spice really pops out, and I can even detect that tonight. So, and that's really fun because it's like all of a sudden you kind of get this nice little sweetness, and then all of a sudden your tongue just kind of explodes with that spiciness. So, Greg, how do you do on that one? We got the pineapple upside down cake.
Yeah, he's spot on. Yeah, this is my favorite after dinner drink. I got to tell you, especially on a night like this, still hot outside. I think heat index is around 99 here today. But when it's hot out like this, and after I've had a great meal, I'll take a nice Glencairn full of it, and I'll throw an ice cube in it, just kind of chill it down a little bit. And it's amazing what the flavors that open up just with that little bit of water and ice cube, what it does to it. But it's my favorite after dinner drink now. It's my go-to. I absolutely love it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a big dessert kind of guy, a big sweets kind of guy. And that's after 6 months, that's why I stopped. So boom, that's all the sweetness my palate likes. I don't want any more because we could have overpowered it. I mean, we could have overpowered it, more sweetness, more rum flavor. And I said, no, that's just enough. Don't want to, enhance or don't want to really damage the integrity of the base whiskey.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say. It's nice to still see that the rye whiskey, the base whiskey coming through and the characteristics of that, so that you're knowing this is still a rye. It's still got some punch on it. It's still got some peppercorn. It's still got some heat with it, rather than just drinking something that's almost uncharacteristically out of balance.
Yeah, for sure, Matt. Yeah, for sure.
So, Greg, in the first session, you mentioned grains. You talked about that just a little bit. So, grains that are being used, are you using Kentucky grains, or can we? I mean, the rye and everything, is it accessible to have that, or?
No, actually, it's difficult. For our bourbon, the corn that we use is predominantly Kentucky and Indiana corn. Okay.
Okay.
The rye and malted barley we use is basically, it's coming from west of Minnesota, kind of northwest of Minnesota, throughout from Minnesota all the way to Idaho, I guess, and probably some up into western Canada as well. That's where you're going to find your high quality rye and your malted barleys. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, you just kind of mentioned that earlier about the grains, and I was kind of curious if you were able to actually find those here in Kentucky to make that.
It makes a difference, so. At Bardstown Bourbon Company, like I've done at all the distilleries I've worked at. When a grain truck comes in, first thing, it goes over a set of scales. You're going to weigh it and make sure that what they say is in that truck is in that truck. But then we also take probes. We run probes throughout that entire. It's an open top truck, and if they have a cover over it, they kind of roll the cover back. But we take probes throughout it, and then we take those composite samples into the quality lab, and you checked it for smell. Number one, smell. I mean, if it's musty, been sitting in a silo somewhere that they had exposure to rain and got wet and got nasty. I mean, and the companies I've worked for, we have rejected truckloads because they just weren't right. They didn't meet just the sensory analysis. But then we do moisture content. There's a number of different quality test analysis that are conducted before that truck is released and comes in and goes into the silo. So, but these are all good grains. I mean, again, that's one of the things, the specifications and procedures that they're using down at Bardstown Bourbon Company are top notch.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. And like I said, I was just kind of curious when we mentioned the grains earlier, how you're getting those and where you were sourcing all those from. So that's great. And I guess, it's kind of hard as production, because the bourbon boom continues. Distilleries are expanding. Like you said, Bardstown's expanding. All of these Kentucky distilleries are expanding, looking down the road 15 to 20 years or more. I don't know that anybody really sees an end in sight. So I'm just wondering what the impact is going to be in terms of finding the grains and all the products and the glass and everything else down the road to keep things flowing.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. I mean, there's it's like anything else. The bourbon industry, as I mentioned, when I got into it in 1978, it was on a decline, but it's all cyclical. Bourbon industry is probably a little bit longer cycle than some of the others, but whether it's vodka, whether it's rum, whether it's gin, it's all cyclical. And I'm loving it. Again, when I got into it, it was on a decline. I saw it bottom out in the 1980s. And there was a couple blips in the early 90s when the Japanese economy took off and Australian economy took off. But then to see it over the last, 10, 12 years or so, I mean, to see it just skyrocket the way it has, it's so gratifying. I just, it just makes my heart full because, again, I've committed pretty much my entire adult career to the industry, and to see it come full bore, and I don't see any end in sight. People ask me every day, this is just a blip, it's going to die. I said, I don't think so. You know what? I think we've got a generation that knows what they like, and they like whiskey. So
yeah, and that's great to see. And as a Kentuckian, it excites me because we produce so much of the bourbon here, and it's so vital to our economy and to all of our people. So it's really cool. And people ask me that question, not that I have anywhere near the experience that you have, but they'll say, is it a bubble? Is it a bourbon bubble? Is it going to pop? And what's going to happen? I'm like, man, these guys that I'm talking to, these companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to expand their facilities. And they're not doing this thinking 1 to 2 years that they're going to invest this money to get it back. They're looking 15 to 20 years down the road. And I've not seen or heard or talked, Matt, we've not talked to anybody that says, yeah, we're going to put the brakes on a little bit because we think it's really going to slow down. Not heard that from anybody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right, guys. Yeah, we are actually getting close to the end of round 3 here, guys. So before we do that, though, Greg, can we talk about you talked about the special release you got coming up toward the end of this year. Anything else going on with you guys? Anything special news or anything coming up in the future that that you'd like to share, or anything exciting going on?
No, not that I can think of off the top of my head, Mark. I mean, I mentioned the 10 that we had this year was the Chicken Cock Cotton Club, this past year actually, and then O&D October, November, December this coming year for the Christmas season, coming out with the Chicken Cock Chanticleer, which is the second edition of the 10, and then in 2023 we're actually going to be doing, because I got the barrels coming, I think hopefully later this month. We're doing a collaboration with a Central Coast winery out in California. They make a phenomenal Syrah wine, and we're going to put some of our bourbon in those Syrah barrels. Now, Syrah wine's much softer. It's going to take a lot longer to sit in that barrel to pick up enough flavor to really enhance the bourbon flavors. And so for O&D of 2023, that's going to be our third rendition of the 10 series. So,
okay, cool. Now, speaking of the bourbon, because we didn't really taste any bourbon, we had that on the first time we did the show. That was a sourced bourbon that we drank. I think if I remember correctly, I think it was a blend of a younger bourbon and an older bourbon that you guys had blended together. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. When I started, actually 2017 was the first bourbon that we laid down as far as my involvement as master distiller with Chicken Cock. And so what we have today, what people are able to buy on the shelf, is some of the first bourbon that I had responsibility for. So we have the current offering is it's a combination of 4-year-old, some 7-year-old, and some 15-year-old.
Okay.
We spoke last time, when I laid down our bourbon, it takes time. You got to let it mature. And so to bridge that gap, part of my responsibility was going out trying to find good quality whiskey that we could acquire and put under the Chicken Cock label to bridge the gap. And you're right. The first time we tasted, I can't remember, 2020, it was probably some 6-year-old and 12-year-old, if I had to guess.
Okay.
But now with the current offering is actually some 4-year-old that we have, some 7-year-old and some 15-year-old that I acquired to blend with it. Again, we could get off on the wood, but one of the things that I do is that I mentioned with West Virginia Great Barrel Company, I go out a year in advance. I select the logs. We cut the staves and heading from those logs. Those staves and heading will air dry for 10 to 12 months. And so through that process, and I go out there about a week and a half before we make the whiskey, oversee the barrel production, make sure they're all toasted properly and charred properly. But that's coming to fruition here, hopefully in the next year or two, and it's going to be fantastic. I taste the whiskey every 6 months, and when you create all the flavor that white oak barrel has to offer, you can get so much more flavor out quicker. I don't believe in accelerated maturation. It's going to take at least 4 years old or longer to get good quality whiskey. But in 4 years old, the flavor of our whiskey is comparable to 6 years or older.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Gregg, before we get out of here, can you tell people where they can find your products? I think you said you're in 42 states now. Is that right?
Yeah, don't ask me to list all 42.
They can get on the website.
No, I mean, here in Kentucky, we're everywhere. I mean, I've done tastings throughout in Lexington, Louisville, up around Newport, Covington area, Fort Thomas, and so yeah. I mean, if you can't find it, Republic National is our distributor in Kentucky.
Okay.
As far as other states, we have different distributors throughout those 42 states, and it's doing well. I mean, I couldn't be more happier with the momentum and the hype on it, and people are loving it. I belong to probably, I don't know, 15, 20 whiskey groups on Facebook, and it gets some great press. So,
well, great. That's awesome, Gregg. And we're really happy to have you back. And I mean, it's a success story. We're very happy to be able to support that and enjoy the whiskey as well. You guys are doing some really, really great things, and you got a great partner, obviously, with Bardstown Bourbon. So that's really, really cool. Matt, final thoughts on this Island Rooster before we wrap it up?
Huge hit. Absolutely love it. Everything we've had tonight, everything I've tasted from Chicken Cock and from you, Gregg, has just been absolutely wonderful. It hits on so many different notes, and just the care that goes into it is very evident in the end product. So we appreciate so much you being willing to come back on here spend another hour or so chatting with us and letting our listeners know what you've been up to at Chicken Cock. And hey, when your next 6-month tasting comes around of all your barrels, let me know. I'll be there.
Yeah, you guys aren't that far, man. I mean, tell you what, man, I'll let you know. I go down there, and I'll be down there actually next month for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I got a VIP tour, but that's when I'm going to be pulling those samples. So you guys aren't doing anything in September, come on down that week of the Bourbon Festival and let you taste with us.
Yeah, that's great. It's about an hour away from us here in Lexington, so that's not too bad at all. All right, Greg, before we wrap it up, anything you want to add to close it out?
No, again, I just appreciate the opportunity, guys. I appreciate you guys. You guys, I mean, we talked earlier about COVID, and if it wasn't for you guys, there's no telling where this industry would be. You guys promote the industry that I love and I'm passionate about. It's been my life, and I can't thank you enough for what you do to promote not just Chicken Cock whiskey, but all the whiskey. I've always tried to be a true ambassador for the industry, not just the brands I worked for. And you guys do that, to the exponential, number. So it's great. Thank you so much.
Well, again, like I said, a guy with your experience giving us a compliment, I'm going to take that and run with it. For sure. We definitely appreciate that, Greg. So before I wrap it up completely, I want to thank all of our sponsors. Again, we really appreciate everything that they do for us. And of course, you, our listeners, we appreciate you guys as well. Appreciate all your support. We obviously do this because we're passionate about it, but we love sharing our passion and the great stories with you guys. So we appreciate everything that you do as our listeners and our supporters. You can check us out on Instagram at The Bourbon Life. You can also find us on Facebook. Again, it's just The Bourbon Life. And you can join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers, if you feel so inclined to do that. If you'd like to, and we'd appreciate it, if you get a chance to leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform, that would mean a lot to us. And if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to us, share some ideas, or tell us how awful we are or whatever, no, please don't do that. But if you want to tell us how great we are, please feel free to send us an email. You can reach us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com, or of course you can direct message us on Instagram or Facebook. And with that said, I'm going to say, Greg, thank you so much again for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we'll do this again sometime pretty soon for sure. It was a lot of fun, and look forward to getting to have you on for a third time at some point. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.